Pause. What if toxic energy surfaced so that we could see it, feel it, confront it, and then heal it? No.
Pinellas County deputy is being remembered by her friends as a ray of sunshine. The Pasco Sheriff's Office says Deputy Troy Savetz kidnapped her around 5:30 p.m. from her home in Hudson in front of her 2 children.
A girl picked up the phone, stayed calm, and told a 911 dispatcher that the man in her front yard was a sheriff's deputy. Minutes later, her mother was gone. Before we get into it, if you're new here, take a second to hit subscribe and turn on that bell icon for real true crime analysis. It genuinely helps this channel keep covering cases like this one, and I don't want you to miss a single investigation. If this story moves you at all, drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. Now, let's get into what happened to Mandy Fackler. Amanda Fackler went by Mandy. She was 39 years old, living in Hudson, Florida, a quiet community in Pasco County. By profession, she was a realtor with Century 21 Beggins, and by all accounts, she was good at it. She had built a career helping people navigate the Florida housing market, handling everything from transaction coordination to brokerage support. But if you talk to the people who actually knew her, the job was never the headline. The headline was her daughters. She had 2 girls, 12 and 9 years old. Friends who knew the family described the 3 of them as inseparable. The kind of bond where the mother wasn't just a parent, but a best friend too. One friend called them the 3 Musketeers. Mandy loved being outdoors with her kids. She had a relationship with a local boating company called Aqua Soul Adventures, and the captain there would later describe her as far more than a customer, someone who became like family. She loved bright colors, she loved animals, and friends remember her fostering baby skunks until they were old enough to be on their own. In a Facebook post from just weeks before her death, she wrote about buying a new car so her daughters could, in her words, roll 3 deep in the front seat with her. She said she loved doing life with them. That's the woman at the center of this story. Not just a name and a headline, but a mother who, by every account available to us, built her entire world around her children. Now here's where the story gets complicated, and where we have to be careful to separate what's confirmed from what's still developing. Mandy had a relationship with a man named Troy Savetz. He was 47 years old, and he wasn't just any boyfriend. He was a deputy with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, a 14-year veteran assigned to the Marine unit. Before that, he had worked in law enforcement in St. Louis. Publicly, he had a fairly high-profile image. He'd thrown out a first pitch at a Tampa Bay Rays game. In 2018, he was named an SPCA Tampa Bay ambassador after he found and adopted a stray pig. But according to Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Galtieri, the relationship between Mandy and Troy was, in his words, on again, off again, and tumultuous. That word matters. It tells us this wasn't a simple, stable relationship. It had cycles. And in one of those cycles, just months before her death, Mandy posted something on Facebook that now reads very differently in hindsight. She wrote about choosing to get back together with him, saying maybe they were meant to grow with each other this time, not battling one another, but standing side by side. She acknowledged she'd had her own struggles and that giving him another chance was part of moving forward. At the time, it was just a woman being open about her relationship online. Looking back now, it's one of the details investigators and the public keep returning to. So we have a mother, deeply devoted to her children, and we have a boyfriend, a trained law enforcement officer, in a relationship authorities themselves would later describe as troubled. On August 10th, 2026, those 2 threads collided in the front yard of her own home. And what happened next would end with 2 people dead and 2 children changed forever. It was a Monday afternoon, and it had been a good day. Mandy and her 2 daughters had spent it at the beach, the kind of ordinary summer outing that becomes unbearable to think about in hindsight. Around 5:30 in the evening, they pulled up to their home on Phyllis Lane in Hudson. And that's when everything changed. Waiting in the front yard was Troy Savetz. According to Pasco County Sheriff Chris Nacco, Savetz and Mandy immediately began arguing. The dispute, at least on the surface, was about a television. Savetz wanted it back. It sounds almost absurd to say out loud, doesn't it? A disagreement over a TV set escalating into a kidnapping and a murder. But domestic violence rarely follows a logical script. The object of an argument is often just the spark, not the real fuel. Whatever tension had been building in that relationship, it found its outlet that evening. Mandy tried to do the responsible thing. She reached for her phone and tried to call 911. But Savetz took the phone out of her hands before the call could go through. Think about that moment for a second. A law enforcement officer, someone trained in exactly how emergency response works, physically stopping his ex-girlfriend from reaching the very system he was part of. With her phone gone, Mandy did the only thing she could. She turned to her daughters, 12 and 9 years old, and told them to go inside and call for help. They listened. They ran inside, picked up another phone, and dialed 911 themselves. One of the children stayed on the line with dispatchers, calmly explaining what was happening in the yard outside, and specifically identifying Savetz as a Pinellas County deputy. Sheriff Nako would later praise the children for how composed they were under circumstances no child should ever have to face. By the time Pasco County deputies arrived at the house, the yard was empty. They cleared the home and found the two girls safe inside. But Mandy and Savetz were both gone. Her truck was still parked outside, door left open. Her cell phone sat inside the house. But she wasn't there. Neither was he. That's when this turned into a multi-agency search. The Florida Highway Patrol got involved. So did the Hernando County Sheriff's Office. Pasco deputies brought in K-9 units, drones, and aviation support. This wasn't a routine domestic disturbance call anymore. It was now a search for a missing woman, last seen being confronted by an armed man who happened to carry a badge. Think about the scale of that response. Multiple agencies, multiple counties, air support, and ground units mobilized within a short window because deputies understood exactly what they might be dealing with. This wasn't treated as a routine missing persons case. From the earliest moments, it carried the weight of something far more urgent. The fact that the suspect was a fellow officer, someone who knew how patrol patterns and dispatch worked, added another layer of complexity to an already dangerous situation. At some point during the search, investigators got a break. They received location information pointing to a rental vehicle in the 16,000 block of Platinum Drive in Spring Hill, several miles from Mandy's home. A deputy located the car. Before anyone approached, they sent up a drone to assess the situation from a distance. What they saw or didn't see led them to move in on foot. Around 7 o'clock that evening, they reached the vehicle. Inside, they found both Mandy Fackler and Troy Savetz dead. Investigators determined that Savetz shot Mandy before turning the gun on himself. A murder followed by a suicide inside a rental car, miles from the home where it all began just over an hour earlier. Let's sit with the timeline for a second because it raises real questions. In roughly 90 minutes, Savetz went from arguing over a television in a front yard to driving Mandy several miles away and killing her. What happened in that car during the drive? Did they speak? Did she try to reason with him or fight back? We don't know, and it's important to say clearly that we may never know. Investigators themselves said they were still working to determine exactly when and where the fatal shots were fired. Was it early in that drive or in the final moments before police closed in? That gap in the timeline is one of the more unsettling parts of this case. Sheriff Galtieri didn't hold back when addressing what happened. He called Savetz's actions horrific and inexcusable. He made a point of separating the badge from the man, saying that the moment Savetz committed this crime, he stopped being a law enforcement officer and became, in his words, simply a criminal. He also mentioned that there appeared to be some mental health issues involved, though he was careful not to use that as any kind of excuse. As he put it, there is no reason to have a permanent solution to a temporary problem, whatever was going on between them. The Pinellas County Sheriff's Office also confirmed they were reviewing Savetz's personnel and disciplinary file for release. That detail matters because it points to unanswered questions about who Troy Savetz really was behind the public image. This was a man who had thrown a ceremonial first pitch at a Rays game, a man celebrated for adopting a stray pig and representing an animal welfare organization. Publicly, a decorated deputy with 14 years on the job. Privately, someone in a relationship his own sheriff described as tumultuous. How do those two pictures fit together? That's a question the personnel review may or may not ever fully answer. It's worth pausing on that contrast because it's one of the reasons this case has resonated so widely. We're used to true crime cases where the warning signs, in hindsight, seem obvious. A history of complaints, a paper trail, something that should have raised alarms. Here, at least based on what has been made public so far, the picture is more complicated. A community remembered a man who saved a stray pig and threw out a ceremonial pitch at a ball game. None of that erases what happened on August 10th, and Sheriff Galtieri was clear about that. But it does raise a harder question about how well any of us can really know what happens behind closed doors, even with someone the public saw as a positive figure. There's also the matter of Mandy's own words from that Facebook post months earlier about giving the relationship another chance and growing through the pain together. It's easy, with hindsight, to read that as a warning sign. But we have to be careful here. Plenty of relationships have difficult chapters that don't end in violence. Hindsight can make ordinary complexity look like a red flag it never was. What we can say, based on official statements, is that authorities themselves characterize the specific relationship as troubled on and off over time. Whether there were prior incidents, prior calls to police, or a documented history of escalation has not been made public. That remains one of the central open questions in this case. What we do know without question is what Mandy did in her final moments of contact with her children. She didn't run. She didn't freeze. She physically couldn't get through to 911 herself, but she found another way. She sent her daughters inside and told them to make the call. In the middle of what must have been terrifying confusion, she made a decision that authorities believe kept her children safe. Does that detail strike you the way it strikes me? In the worst moment of her life, her instinct wasn't self-preservation. It was protecting her girls. The aftermath has rippled through her community. Friends have spoken about her warmth, her humor, her love of bright colors and animals. The captain from Aqua Soul Adventures, the boating company she and her daughters loved, publicly offered to help arrange a memorial at sea for her, calling her more than a customer, a friend, and part of the family. A fundraiser was set up to support her daughters, who are now in the care of their biological father. Friends who spoke to local reporters painted a consistent picture of who Mandy was outside of this tragedy. One friend described her smile as, in her words, annoyingly contagious, saying it was impossible not to laugh along with her. Another remembered her as witty and unapologetically herself, someone who dressed in bright colors because that reflected who she was on the inside. Those details might seem small next to the scale of what happened to her, but they matter. They remind us that behind every case like this is a full, complicated, joyful life, not just the final terrible chapter. It's easy, in true crime storytelling, to let the crime overshadow the person. Mandy deserves to be remembered as more than how she died. So where does that leave us? We know the timeline of that Monday evening, from the confrontation in the yard, to the stolen phone, to the children's call to 911, to the search that ended in Spring Hill. We know Savetz was a longtime deputy in a relationship his own sheriff called tumultuous. We know he took Mandy's life and then his own. What we don't know and may never know with full certainty is what happened during those missing minutes in that car. What specifically triggered that level of violence beyond a disagreement over a television, and whether there were warning signs along the way that went unspoken or unreported. This case sits at an uncomfortable intersection. A domestic violence case, yes, but one involving a law enforcement officer, which raises separate questions about oversight, about how departments track officers in troubled relationships, and about whether a badge can sometimes provide cover, intentionally or not, for behavior that would raise alarms in anyone else. Could investigators have overlooked something important in his past? Was there a moment earlier in that relationship where intervention might have changed the outcome? We don't have confirmed answers to those questions yet, and it's important we don't pretend to. What we can hold on to is this. A mother, in her final act of agency, protected her children. 2 young girls are alive today, in large part because of a decision Mandy Fackler made in a matter of seconds. That's not speculation. That's fact, confirmed by the very 911 call that saved them. I'd like to hear what you think about this case. Do you think there were warning signs that went unnoticed? What do you think really happened during that drive to Spring Hill? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. If you found this analysis informative, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Real True Crime Analysis, and turn on notifications so you never miss another investigation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next case.